Hey everyone, and welcome to week 2 of our course. So this week we're talking about epistemology. And in particular, we're talking about what knowledge is, which is a specific question that we ask in epistemology. And we're going to look at a set of thought experiments called Gettier problems or Gettier cases that try to argue against the most intuitively plausible answer. The answer to the question, what is knowledge, that sort of makes the most sense, but it turns out doesn't work. And there's still an open question in philosophy asking what knowledge actually is. Because clearly, we all talk about knowledge. We say we know things. We say other people know things. Clearly, there is some actual thing that we're talking about. We're not all hallucinating that some people know something and other people don't know something. But what exactly is it? And that's going to be the question we ask this week, and that's going to be a surprisingly difficult question. And we're not going to get to a nice, clear answer with a little bow tied on it. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen very often in philosophy. Usually, once that happens, we then sort of pass it off to another field, who then works on it because sort of the early philosophical questions have now been answered. There was a lot of philosophy work on what the right relationship between logic and math was. And now some of those questions have kind of been answered. Turns out math cannot be reduced to logic, as some people thought it could at the late 1800s, early 1900s. So now mathematicians go do their thing. Philosophers work on other questions. That was a philosophical question that got answered clearly. But what is knowledge has not yet been answered clearly. There is still time. We may one day answer that question clearly, but it hasn't been answered clearly yet. So I'm going to really upload some videos about the what is knowledge question, and about the Gettier cases and Gettier problems, and about necessary and sufficient conditions, because that's an important concept, and it's going to be our concept question topic for this week. So, before I do that though, I want to talk a little bit about what epistemology is and what the questions in epistemology are, because we're going to start talking about epistemology this week, but we're not going to finish talking about epistemology for a few more weeks. So I want us to get sort of clear on what epistemology is as a topic. And epistemology, which I made a nice little Sesame Street style sign for you, epistemology. Today's video brought to you by the word epistemology. Now, what is epistemology? Epistemology comes from the Greek word episteme, meaning knowledge, roughly. Any translation between an ancient language and a modern language is going to be rough. And so the rough translation of the ancient Greek word episteme is knowledge. And epistemology, as the name sort of suggests, once you know the translation, is the study of knowledge. It's the field of philosophy that studies knowledge. So one of the big questions in epistemology, and the one we're going to tackle this week, is just what is knowledge? Because we all know things, or we all seem to know things. There are some things we know and some things we don't know. We don't know the correct theory of quantum gravity. That's an open problem in physics that we don't know the answer to yet. We do know that 2 + 2 = 4. We know, most of us know anyway, that the Earth is round, roughly. Some people believe that the Earth is flat. That's a belief that they have. They believe the Earth is flat. But they don't know that the Earth is flat. Why? Because the Earth isn't flat. And knowledge has to be true, by definition. You can't know something that's false. If you know something, then it must be true. Otherwise, you don't know it. You just think you know it. You have a false belief in that case. So what knowledge is matters because we take ourselves to know things, and many fields of inquiry, math, physics, chemistry, sociology, history, claim to produce knowledge, to discover new things and expand what we as a species know. And when you take classes, you are supposed to learn new things so that you personally now expand your knowledge. You know more, hopefully, at the end of a class than when you started. You know that some facts are the case now. You know how to do things. And those are two different kinds of knowledge. Knowledge that, which is knowledge of facts and information, versus knowledge how, which is like skills, knowing how to do something. And those don't necessarily connect. You can know how to hit a baseball with a bat in a baseball game and not really know a lot of information about why it works or knowing what the mechanics of that are. You just know how to do it. Similarly, you can know a lot of information about exactly what's happening when a baseball player hits a baseball and not be able to do it yourself. You can know a lot of information about it, but still not know how to actually do it. Knowledge like knowing information and knowledge like knowing how to do something, knowing skills, are two different kinds of knowledge. And studying how they're related and what other kinds of knowledge there might be is something epistemologists do. That some epistemologists, at least, work on that, studying knowledge that, knowledge how, and other sorts of other kinds of knowledge, other types of knowledge, which some psychologists and cognitive scientists also work on that, and sometimes there's work sort of co-authored between members of different fields to try to answer some of these questions that are sort of at the borders between epistemology and philosophy and questions in cognitive science and psychology about how the mind works and how our brains function. So different kinds of knowledge is also a question that epistemologists try to answer. Studying and examining different kinds of knowing, besides just asking what knowledge is. That's a question about a certain definition or a certain concept. But besides that, there are other ways we can investigate knowledge by looking at different kinds of knowledge. And epistemologists also ask what we can or can't know about. So some questions, we might think the answer is just unknowable. Some people think whether or not God exists is an unknowable question. We cannot know the answer to that. Other people who we're going to look at later in this course think that we can't actually know anything about the external world, meaning the world outside of our own minds. Some people think we should be skeptical about the world outside of our own minds. We don't know for sure that our senses are telling us the truth. That's one question or one view that some people have in epistemology that people argue about. It's arguing about skepticism, where skepticism is the view that you can't know something. Skepticism about morality is the view that you can't know what's morally right and what's morally wrong. Skepticism about the external world says you can't know any information about what's happening outside of your own mind. Skepticism about math says you can't know any mathematical claims. You can't know anything about math. Your beliefs about mathematics are somehow less than knowledge. And that is going to be a question that we're going to look at. What should we be skeptical about? In what sense might some of our beliefs turn out to be less than knowledge? And that's another question that is interesting. What is the relationship between knowledge, which is taken as this sort of strong, guaranteeing truth sort of claim, state that you can be in? If you know something, then it must be true. And then weaker than that is belief. You believe something to be true, but you might not know it. So how do you get from belief to knowledge? What sort of sources of information and what kinds of evidence can take you from mere belief to knowledge? Empirical evidence, like from scientific experiments, maybe a kind of evidence that can get you from belief to knowledge. a rigorous mathematical proof might be a piece of evidence that can get you from belief to knowledge. A rigorous argument, like a really solid argument, might be something that can take you from belief to knowledge. If you see a strong enough argument, maybe you no longer just believe the claim that it's being argued for. Maybe now you know it. Those are different kinds of evidence that we're going to look at in this course while we're talking about epistemology. And another topic that epistemologists can cover that we're going to look at a little bit asks about justification. So it's not about knowledge directly, but it's certainly relevant. What justifies a belief? Because you can make a distinction between belief and knowledge, but you might say, look, I don't know how to define knowledge. I don't want to really worry about that. What I want to make sure of is that my beliefs are justified, that I don't have any unjustified beliefs. I don't have any beliefs that I shouldn't have or that aren't supported by something. I want all my beliefs to have some sort of justification tied to them. I want my beliefs to be backed up and justified by some kind of evidence. So which of my beliefs are justified and which aren't? And how do I get justified beliefs? What counts as a justification for a belief? If I read a bunch of stuff on the internet saying the earth is flat, am I now justified in believing the earth is flat? Probably not. If I had a dream that vampires were trying to take over the government, am I now justified in believing the conspiracy theory that vampires are trying to take over the government? Probably not. Some things can justify your belief, and some things definitely can't. And so what counts as a justification and what doesn't count as a justification, and what kinds of justification and what kinds of evidence can give us justified beliefs, beliefs that are supported and warranted, rather than just beliefs that we probably shouldn't have? That's an interesting question that we're going to talk about. And it's a question that matters because we want justified beliefs. True beliefs are better than false beliefs because how you move about in the world is based on your beliefs. When you need to use the restroom and you get up and go to the restroom, you're able to do that successfully because your belief about where the restroom is true. If you had a false belief, you wouldn't be able to find it. You'd go somewhere else and either would not be able to use the restroom when you wanted to, or would end up peeing somewhere that's not a restroom. And both of those are pretty bad. So you want true beliefs, and justification can help make sure that you have true beliefs. A justified belief that is supported by evidence is much more likely to be true than unjustified belief. It's unsupported by anything. And so we want justified beliefs. Ideally, we want knowledge, but depending on what knowledge is, it may not be clear what knowledge is. So we may have to settle for looking at justified beliefs and trying to get justified beliefs. And so these are all topics and questions that epistemologists look at, that epistemologists try to understand. Questions about what knowledge is, what the different kinds of knowledge are, what we do or don't know, what we can or can't know, and what justifies or warrants or gives good evidence for beliefs. These are all important questions that we're going to talk about in this course. And these all fall under the heading of epistemology. So I'm going to stop this video here. I'm going to start with a video with lecture slides talking about what knowledge is and what necessary and sufficient conditions are. And I will see you in the next video. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. My office hours are this week. I will send out the email link. If you don't have it, please let me know. I'll send out the Zoom link, If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.